Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Israel Wongsarnpigoon.
I'm Rob Stevenson.
And I'm Philip Bennett.
So we're from Kanda University of International Studies. And today we're going to be talking about a course that we've taught in which we used MOOCs for self-directed learning.
All right, so I'm going to start us off, and I'm going to just briefly introduce MOOCs and go over kind of the structure of our courses. All right, so what is a MOOC? I'm sure most of us already know, but for those that don't, MOOC stands for Massive Open Online Course. And in these courses, the number of participants are potentially limitless. So any number of people can join, and they're open to anyone that has internet access. So yes, currently, most MOOCs are, or all MOOCs are online. And finally, MOOCs, these courses are dealing with very specific topics. So I'm sure some of us are familiar with some of these MOOCs. So here are some well-known MOOC providers. So yeah, they're all different, and they all are have different structures and ways of interacting with the learners. So going to our course has about 3 phases. And phase 1, we get students used to the MOOC. So we talk about the MOOCs and explain the MOOCs and understand what MOOCs are and their purpose. We also talk about the history a little bit of the MOOCs. Then we go on to exploring the MOOCs. So we go to the different MOOC providers and check out the websites and, kind of see the differences and similarities between the different MOOC providers. And then finally, we jump into a MOOC course and we look at the components of the MOOC. So looking at the videos, understanding, how to use the different video functions, maybe showing subtitles, slowing down the videos, speeding up the videos, looking at the different materials that are provided, some of the readings and how they can be accessed, as well as some more of the interactive elements, which we'll talk about later, like discussion boards and so on. Then while we are, understanding the MOOCs and getting to know the MOOCs, students are, getting some information and learning about effective learning skills, such as time management, note-taking, peer sharing, like, talking with others, getting used to talking with others. And these skills are something that are worked on and that are continuously developed throughout the entire course. And they are kind of the main focus, actually, of the course in most aspects. So this phase 1 lasts about 6 weeks. And then finally, students will choose a MOOC, and then they will begin phases 2 and 3. And these 2 phases will be covered later on in the presentation. But generally, students begin, choosing a MOOC and then learning the MOOC. And during this time, they're doing reflection, peer sharing, and also getting some written advising using reflective dialogue. And also, students are, kind of, informed or, they're constantly gets reminded that it's not about finishing the MOOC, right? It's about the journey of them doing the MOOC. It's about, them learning how to learn and developing, the skills to become an effective learner. And that is, a focus that we really, feel is important with our course is, it's not about, catching up or falling behind in a particular MOOC, but, the skills and the journey and what they learn in that learning journey, that we feel is really important for them and what they are, ultimately assessed on. And then, finally in phase 3, they move on to reflective presentations, which will be covered a bit later. So phases 2 and 3, this is the majority of the course. So it's roughly a 9-week process. Yeah, so that's all for this section.
Okay, so there are many things that students can think about when they choose a course. You can go to the next slide. And So we have two offerings of this course. There's Phil and Rob Mine course in the IC department, and Isra and Yuri in the Asian and Ibero-American language majors. So they study other languages. Our course is 100% online, while their course is a mix, 50% online, 50% face-to-face. And they're all for third and fourth year students. So the reasons they choose these MOOCs, we don't tell them what to study. They have to choose it themselves. So students, we will guide them into thinking what they need or want. And they will often think about their future, what they imagine they will be doing later, anything that they are curious about and want to learn more. Skills, if they want to learn anything like presentations, Excel, things that they might need in the future. And any problem solving, which comes up a lot. They see problems in the world, they want to fix it, so they study. There's a list of examples on the right. As you can see, it's a very wide range of topics. And we really don't limit mostly what they learn. So it's really interesting seeing what they do and learn about. Some of the concerns that students raise when they're looking for courses are things like the level of language use. Some courses use more advanced English, some less. So they need to examine that and find something that they can work with. The length of the course comes up a lot. They don't have to finish the MOOC, but some MOOCs can be really long or really short. So they need to look at that. How do they retain interest throughout their entire time? They can change later, but they really want to think about how can they keep going even when the class finishes. Other things we look at the videos, readings, and the quality of those, and does it match their own learning styles? And an important note is we avoid language MOOCs. They don't learn language directly, only through the content. So that's authentic English learning is much better for them.
Okay, so now let's just start talking about some of the things which we did during the course of the semester. So one big part of this course was support for students' reflection throughout the semester. And it was a really central part of the class, and it was folded into the class each week. So in phase one of the class, before they started doing their MOOC learning, we provided space and time for them to kind of reflect and record their thoughts about what we'd been doing in each class meeting. And so you can see here, they could record what they did. There were kind of different levels in scaffolding in the prompts. So in my class, mine Yuri's class, we had slightly more scaffolding in the form of kind of like direct prompts or suggestions for things they might want to reflect on. And in doing this throughout the semester, we also supported the reflection through written feedback from us, from the instructors. And that helped to promote some reflective dialogue. And like, because all of us were advisors, this is one way that we were able to incorporate advising into the class. And we also gave them some opportunities to work on their reflective skills. And we had some like tasks or exercises in the form of kind of learner training in order to help them, work on those skills. And so they had a chance to kind of formulate how and why reflective questions for themselves. So like, for example, they would look at an earlier reflection from the course, kind of make these how and why questions to ask themselves, and then they'd revise the reflection in order to incorporate and answer those questions. And then they had a chance to share these new reflections with peers and give each other feedback in class. And so we see here some quotes from students' reflections, and it kind of shows what they got from the experience. So like, for example, the first one is kind of, we see this sort of idea of getting inspired by asking one question after another. And that's kind of what we like to see, in that reflective cycle. But on the other hand, the second quote kind of shows, you see here, making questions was difficult for me. It made me feel strange. So as we know, reflection is not always an easy or comfortable process for students at first. But you can see, like, we'll see later that they got something out of the process. And then moving on to the second phase of the class, when the students are actually doing their MOOC learning, students were keeping a journal of their learning in a reflective journal. And each week they chose an aspect of their learning process to focus on. So for example, time management or motivation or collaborating with others. And they also chose reflective questions to answer in the reflection. And they could choose these questions from a question bank, which was adapted from this project in Hong Kong, or they could write their own questions. And so they would use this as a basis for their reflection. And we also had, during the semester, after they had started their MOOC learning, we also had in-class peer support for choosing reflective questions, like based on the reflection which they shared with each other. And then near the end of the semester, after they're almost finished with phase 2, they were looking back on the actions that they'd taken throughout the semester and connecting them to aspects of the learning process. And they evaluated satisfaction with each part. And this kind of helped them to look at their learning as a whole for the semester. Another thing we really focused on in the class was interconnectivity with each other and with other learners online. So in each class meeting, we had peer sharing sessions about their MOOC learning. So they're sharing, what they had learned and how they had learned it. And they had opportunity to give each other feedback and questions about what they had done. We also had mini presentations each week about what they'd been doing in their MOOC learning. And also we really made it a point to explore, encourage them to explore connecting with other MOOC learners online. I think, every MOOC tends to have a discussion forum or a comment section for students to interact with each other, for MOOC learners to interact. So we kind of helped them, we scaffolded this in class, giving them some time to kind of explore the benefits of learning with other people online. And we talked about, how they can connect with each other, what's important when connecting with each other. And we gave them a chance to practice posting in the forums. And I think some of our students really made it a part of their learning activities every week. And some students really enjoyed interacting and exchanging ideas with other students on the MOOC forums. And another thing that we looked at in the class was really like having the students consider their learning environments. This is really important because the MOOC learning was something that they tended to do on their own in their own time. And also, this is something that's going to help them in their other self-directed learning, like especially after they finish university. So we did exercises in class about kind of reflecting on and sharing with each other about, what is important in a learning environment, which was, conducive for like, getting into the zone for their study. So you see here, this example was like students were looking at the kind of different aspects, different characteristics of environments which were good for them. And after doing this in class, they thought of a change that they could make to their learning environment the following week. And then they tried that change and reflected on how it went for them.
So in addition to the environmental issues, students need to consider their time and energy. We give them one class period a week to do their work, but it's optional. They can take time other days to study. They can break it up into several days or do it all at once. They have a choice between mornings and evenings, so they have a lot of flexibility in what they can do. And then an issue that comes up with that is balancing the content and the language required to learn that content. And students need to find ways to focus more on the content and learn that stuff, and then language should come next. It takes some work for students to find that. In addition to that, they need to find the outside resources, which could be Japanese resources, Wikipedia, YouTube, other people, and use those to help their learning. It's not just the MOOC, but everything. After all of that stuff is done, they need to spend some time on the reflective journals. So it's 90 minutes plus 30 or so.
Okay, so next we'll look at kind of the things that students got out of the class and what kind of things they focused on, looking at examples from their presentations or from the course questionnaires. Okay, so a couple things we saw signs of this reflective process, which was really helping students to develop metacognitive skills and like be more aware of their learning. So you see here this example, and then can we click through to the next one? Yeah, examples of students finding problems in their learning, difficulties, and linking them really to like actionable solutions. And something I like here, this example, students really noticing things, learning more about themselves. So like their strengths, their weaknesses, and how they've grown during the semester. Yeah, and then here again, the students finding like good things and bad things about their learning style. And as I'd mentioned, that we'd really focusing on connecting with others, with other learners. So we see here students really appreciated the opportunity to share with each other in the class. This student also really enjoyed working with other students online in the forums. You see here, this student, like getting advice from their classmates and also sharing their new learning, their new vocabulary with others. Yeah, and then just these kind of quotes from the questionnaires. You see, it served learning, communicating with their classmates was a way to build their motivation, to keep up their motivation, get inspiration from each other related to their studying.
Phil and I conducted interviews after the class finished, and this was a huge part of the class. Like, we would teach things, do workshops, but the students talking with each other, sharing ideas, that is what they walked away with most out of it. So even though they're learning online, learning their own topics, the talking and sharing part was just the biggest part of the class. So in the future, when they are learning MOOCs on their own, it's important for them to find other people to share things with and continue that face-to-face interconnectivity kind of learning.
Okay, and we also saw, again, this focus on learning environments. And maybe it was a matter of the amount of time that we spent in class discussing the environments, but this was something that students really worked on throughout the semester. And so you see some examples here, for example, where students were making the connection between their environments and things that they were struggling with, or they were finding negative issues in their current environment and trying to solve them. And other things like students, trying out different environments and evaluating the positive and negative points of each one and fixing and adjusting various things about their environments. So this was something that we saw that was really important to them. And then finally, because this is JASAL, looking at some applications for how this all connects to self-access. So one major point is, students were choosing and learning content that was relevant and motivating to them. And in doing so, they were finding out about themselves. And so this kind of reminded me of this line by Tomlinson. And he was writing about materials for self-access, but it's kind of also relevant here, where students were accessing themselves, not just self-access. And also we saw students exercising their agency in choosing their learning materials and shaping their learning environments and considering the learning strategies that they would use. And another important thing that we saw was that we and the students considered the differences between what they were doing this semester in their MOOC learning, this purposeful online learning, compared with the emergency remote learning that they went through last year. And they were able to find some positive points and find ways that they could make online learning positive when it was something that they were choosing to do. And so this all adds up, and this all comes down to that they were taking charge of their learning, which is what we want to see in self-access environments. And just finally, some quotes from the reflections and the evaluation questionnaires, things that really tie this up together. So you see students finding their best way to learn here in the top left, making a habit of studying something by using English, noticing the importance of reflection and applying their reflection to their next learning. The one I like in the bottom left also, like the non-English language majors, we often see that their English study starts to fall behind their major language. So this was an opportunity for them to enjoy learning something using English. And then finally, as we've been talking about, focusing on themselves and learning more about themselves and understanding themselves. And I think that's what we want to see in self-access. Okay, and these are the things we referenced. So we'll have time for questions and answers, I hope, from now. Thank you.